Boom.
All right. Good morning. Live on location, as you guys can see here.
Yep.
Is this background you fully believe we're there? Look at
I'm here.
Look at the effects on this.
Just on the beach.
It's top notch. All right. We are going to go through and we are going to talk about some concepts from the AP exam. And I was thinking the other day, I feel like our last session that we just recorded was almost a little bit too much focused on the spring kits. And we really want to make sure that everybody that has in the fall, we knock off a little bit of rust. And so one of the things that we touched on before was, like, I want you to think about things even like the media unit. So social media, all of us understand clearly, and we're not going to pretend that you don't. That can be run by anybody. That it can be small. You can have a social media following. I can have a much smaller social media following. But a media conglomerate, on the other hand, is big media. That's CBS, NBC, Fox. Those are the major media companies. Honestly, even zoomed out even more, Disney. All right. So when you are reading a question, and I'm not even going to get into like specifics of some questions with this, it's more like concepts that we're worried about you misunderstanding. A media conglomerate is the large media, while social media can be a counterweight to that. So the rise in social media runs perpendicular to the power of the media conglomerate, if that makes sense. All right, you want to do another one, or you may talk about trends and graphs?
Go ahead and start.
All right, so one thing that I noticed, the question that when we gave your practice exam, and remember all of you, fall and spring, we want you to go back and look at those practice exams. One of the number one things that I noticed is to make sure you're looking for what the graph is talking about. So for example, there was one question about what trend is depicted, and then what does that mean? What would happen after that trend? So a lot of you missed that question because you just told us what the trend that was showing in the graph, not the next step, which is what I was asking you. What does that mean? So based, like I think the exact words were, based off the trend in the graph, what is the next impact? And a lot of you answered it incorrectly because you just told us what was the trend in the graph. All right, so it's things like that. It's not a trick question. That's just thoroughly reading the question. All right, you want to talk about House and Senate a little bit?
Yeah. So one of the things I noticed with my kids when we were doing the practice exam is like College Board. I think going with Coach Sanders says is not trying to trick you, but they're going to choose their words very carefully
to see if you're paying attention.
Yes. Like, so they are not like understand there is a difference when College Board puts Senate, or puts House, or puts Congress, or puts federal government. And if you see those words in a question, you can eliminate possible answer choices because of that.
And so you need to fight through.
Yes, I'm getting better though. Getting better
every day.
So there was one question in particular that, again, they were giving stuff that the Senate does this. All right, but if you know what the Senate powers are, you know the Senate can't do that. So one of the things, whenever you see a question that has the Senate or the House in, you want to pay attention to, like, does the Senate or the House have the capability of actually doing that? Is that under their purview? All right, and that's an easy way to eliminate possible answer choices. All right, so just be very careful that they are very intentional on the words that they use. Okay, and so they will try to trick you up by.
So, for example, when you're talking about checks and balances, I know you are. When you're talking about checks and balances and you're talking about the president and who gets advice and consent, that's just the Senate. When you're talking about making a treaty, that's not Congress, that's not a General Assembly, that's just the Senate that can ratify a treaty or give advice and consent with Supreme Court nominees.
So you're going to
just the Senate.
You're going to want to review what's the House power, what's the Senate's power, and then what do they do both together. The other thing that I think was very important is like the reading passages. So you will have probably 1 to 2 sets of questions where it's going to be anywhere from 3 questions per reading passage, maybe even 4 questions per reading passage. It is perfectly okay to skip that, mark it, go answer another one with the reading passage to kind of help you answer the first one. All right. One of those questions is always going to have to do directly with the reading passage, all right, that you just read. Another one, and probably your second one out of that reading passage, is going to go back to like an AP Gov concept. All right, so that could be a limited government, consent to the government, popular sovereignty. It could talk about federalism. All right, and then it could connect back to a Supreme Court case or even a foundational document. All right, but expect to see those reading passages, and then you can use the other questions within that set of reading passages to answer the first question if you get confused.
All right. While you go through another caution fit, we're going to go through and we're going to talk about some political parties. And we're jumping around a little bit on purpose. We're trying to keep you on your toes. The AP Gov exam realizes that there are two major political parties in Republicans and Democrats, but they don't want to just fully endorse those two parties. Like, you've got to think about like the why behind this a little bit. And so they've got to also ask about third parties. We've also spent a lot of time recently, especially in spring semester, on third parties. They focus on the Libertarian Party. And that is the one that I see over and over and over on AP exams, on practice exams, something their questions. So you need to know some basic planks that make up the platform, buzzwords, of the Republican Party, of the Democratic Party, and the Libertarian Party. So for me, when I'm thinking about what the Libertarian Party would look like, that is, in a nutshell, let me be. That's the Libertarian Party. They're not trying to raise taxes. They're not trying to have a whole bunch of laws. They're trying to have the government do as little as possible. But there's a little bit of Democrat and Republican there on the Libertarian Party. Like, it's its own little unique thing. That's important for you guys to be able to look at.
Yeah, I mean, it's also very important to kind of understand what's the Democratic Party and then what's the Republican Party as a whole. And I think one of the biggest things that I talk to my kids about fall semester and spring semester is that it's bad to say it this way, but you have to fit stuff in a toolbox. Okay, so like one of the questions that a lot of kids got on the FRQs was talking about how the Democratic Party would have more diverse cabinet members, Republican parties are going to have more white cabinet members. You know, statistically, the Democratic Party is going to be more diverse. Like, that's just what the stats say. Like, you can agree with that, disagree with that, but you try to fit things into a box. So don't try to think outside the box with any of these questions. Just, again, it's almost like if you smell peanut butter, it's peanut butter. All right. If you hear hooves, it's a horse. Don't think zebra. All right. That is one of the phrases that people often say.
There's a lot there to really.
There is really a lot. The other thing,
better way to think about that, like what goes with peanut butter? Jelly goes with peanut butter. Yes, I enjoy a good peanut butter and honey sandwich. I'm actually more of a wow butter fan now due to recent circumstances. There's also very nice almond butter with cinnamon. That's not the stuff we're talking about. You want to have mainstream answers.
The other thing that's also, they, again, not trying to trick you up on, sometimes the worst sounding answer, all right, is the best answer because of process of elimination.
Oh, you actually brought up a really good one.
So there's one that we looked at and one that we're going to show, make sure we hit with all the classes tomorrow. We may even post up on that review Canvas course, where it's the one where it's just like, well, they just decided to like disagree, and so now we had to use the executive order, where the rest of the answer choices used big government terms. They used executive order. They talked about Supreme Court. They talked about overriding. Like, all the other answer choices sound way better, but they weren't possible because of what the words they use. They use Senate, they use House, they use Supreme Court, but not in the ways that they have power. So sometimes the best answer is the worst looking answer, and you have to process elimination that. All right. So even if it's like, man, that doesn't really sound like a great answer, if you know the other answers are just not possible because of how they use the House, how they use the Senate, or just like what your knowledge is, then that's the best answer. And it's okay to pick that. Go with your gut with that. Like, if your gut is saying that's the answer, go with your gut. Don't be discouraged because you're like, that doesn't really sound like a good answer. All right. Because a lot of times that is a good answer.
All right. One other thing that I would share, I'm going to talk almost to the fall kids a little bit more specifically. You guys went through and we did a lot of things those last week or two in the semester that said, remember, you're going to forget all this. You're going to forget about AP Gov, and then you're going to go a week or two before the exam. Oh, mess. I got to go study for this. Please look at your Supreme Court cases. Please go back and look at the stuff that we did for you. Look at the stuff that you did for you, because you're going to see questions on the AP Gov exam that are just in the boxes. Like, just like the old SAT questions. This is to this, this is to this. And I've seen more and more and more of those over recent years just on Supreme Court cases. And it's straight up, do you know your 14? And how do you know which ones are your connecting cases? And that's why we spent so much time talking about how those cases connect to one another. So please, please, please go back and do that. Another thing that we're going to see in those boxes questions, which is almost the old SAT style questions, I'll say, powers. Think about formal powers, informal powers, delegated powers, reserved powers, enumerated powers. Think about your Halloween candy. What's the Halloween candy that you're going to reserve that the states kept for themselves, as opposed to which ones did they delegate out to the federal government? Please go back through and look through Supreme Court cases and your powers, and all that stuff is still clearly laid out in your notes. So I'm not just going to identify things.
Yeah.
Good. You got another one, or you may go?
I do not have another one.
All right. One other thing that I would worry about is like representative styles of government. So that's trustee style of government. Remember, trustee, trust me. Delegate, we've delegated this to you. We trust you. Go do it. That kind of stuff is really important. Go through, and we spent time on checks and balances. They're going to go through, and how does this branch check another branch? And that's really, really important for you guys to be able to go through and look and find examples of those things. Look, we went through and we spent a lot of time on vocab folders, and we did that for a reason. We want you to be able to go back in and look at your vocab folders and test yourself. Go through and look at all those words and give it a 1, a 2, or a 3. I know it really well. I kind of know it. I don't even remember writing that word down. That doesn't look like my handwriting. I've never seen that word before in my life. Those are the ones you're going to focus on. And that's what we gave you, that things I need to study document that you guys are continuing to build. Please go through and look at that and be honest with yourself. Like, don't try to make, we said that when we were looking at the FRQs the other day. We have a problem over here. We've got to work on it. Do I ignore it, or am I proactive and am I going to work through it?
I think one of the things also too, going back to that Supreme Court, so they will ask you Supreme Court questions within the multiple choice section. And that's a lot of times going to do with a constitutional principle. So it's going to ask you, and it's not going to give you any information. It's just going to be a straight question about the one of your required Supreme Court cases. And a lot of times the answer is like, what's the constitutional principle that's connected to this? All right. And so knowing the constitutional principle, all right, for every single one of those Supreme Court cases is going to be really important. And then going to the foundational documents just for connecting back to the FRQ and also multiple choice. Like, what are they talking about? How are they connected? Are they connected? Just a little bit about them is going to help you answer any multiple choice questions. Because a lot of times with the foundational documents is that for multiple choice, they're going to give another document of like maybe another Federalist papers that we didn't have to do, maybe a Brutus paper we didn't have to do, maybe a passage, and it's going to connect back to one of those foundational documents. All right. So understanding those foundational documents. All right. Be able to write it. If I was going to ask you to write 5 bullet points about each foundational document, you need to be able to do that.
All right. A couple questions off the top of my head, just thinking about your multiple choice parts. If I get a reading passage, should I read the whole thing? How do I do that? If I see this whole big block of paragraphs here, how do I do that? Let me tell you what our advice is. Read the question first. Know what you're looking for. All right. So rather than having to read the whole passage and then read the question and go, what did I read again? Read the question first. See what you're looking for. Then go back into the passage. Read it. Take a little time. Read it. See what you're looking for. And then you can be a more informed person when you're answering the question at the end. Those are the kind of things that I really want you guys to work on. We've talked about the powers. We've talked about our key terms. The other one that they really, really love is the clauses of the Constitution. And I remember in the fall, we spent a lot of time specifically going over those, from free exercise clause to establishment clause. All right. Commerce clause, necessary and proper clause, which is the same thing as the elastic clause. Like, it's clauses like that you will see over and over in the Constitution. There's only a few of them in the Constitution that they're really going to harp on. And please, please, please go through those, equal protection of the law, and look at things like that so you can be better prepared.
No, 100% agree. And then also just knowing the article titles. It's not going to ask you the individual sections of the articles, but knowing the article titles is going to be really important, just to they might use it as a foundational document, because they can use Constitution, but then they can say Article 1 of the Constitution, and that is fair game for them for the FRQs. They can do that for multiple choice questions also. All right. So just knowing the article titles is going to be very important.
Good. All right. I'm good.
I'm
You?
good.
Awesome. We believe in you guys. See you in person live next Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
All right.